Meewasin is located on Treaty 6 territory and homeland of the Métis. We humbly acknowledge the traditional caretakers of this land and honor the First Nations of this place. Renny is our amazing resource management officer. He's a Nuffield Scholar and a professional agrologist. He will be presenting on prairie native plant seed conservation and the need for a Meewasin Seedbank. So before I turn it over to Renny, I would like to take the time to thank RBC Tech for Nature for sponsoring this webinar series that we've been hosting this winter and spring. We do have one more left coming up at the beginning of April. Some quick housekeeping. Please keep all cameras and mics off during the presentation as there is a larger number of participants in this webinar. Please feel free to use the chat for any questions that you may have. And there will be additional time at the end for questions, for a few questions. This webinar is also being recorded and transcribed and will also be posted on YouTube. The link will be sent out at a later date. Renny, I will now turn it over to you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and thank you, Katie, for organizing this webinar series for us. My name is Renny Grilz. I'm with Meewasin Valley Authority, and I'm the Resource Management Officer with the organization. I've been with Meewasin now for 10 years, and we've been pursuing and discussing the opportunity of creating a seed bank within Meewasin. And I'm going to talk about what we've gone through, the thinking process that we've gone through, what a seed bank is, what are some of the different seed banking programs around the world, and how we could build one here within Saskatoon, but also something that could serve Western Canada. A little bit about Meewasin. So in Meewasin, we were created in 1979 as a specific act of the provincial government. As part of that formation of Meewasin, we developed something called the Meewasin Valley Project, and we had an architect named Raymond Moriyama from Toronto came out to Saskatchewan with his team and spent a full year looking at the South Saskatchewan River Valley within Saskatoon and outside of Saskatoon. And he identified the really uniqueness of this region, the importance of the river valley and conservation within this area as sort of a gem. And so he set the foundation for the Meewasin Valley Authority. As I said, we were created in 1979, and we are actually a partnership of the Saskatchewan government, the City of Saskatoon, and the University of Saskatchewan. And so we are a multi-agency partnership that's responsible for lands within our jurisdiction. And each of these organizations appoint 4 members to our board of directors as part of this partnership. Our mandate is to ensure a healthy and vibrant river valley, but also balancing that human use and conservation within the river valley. And so my programs within Meewasin and the team that I work with the resource management team, we lead the conservation initiatives within Meewasin. We also have education components where we educate people about the importance of the river valley, of our conservation of the river valley, and then also how to interact with the valley as well. And then our development mandate is providing access to the river valley to have people engage interactively with the valley, but also as part of the act, we also control development as well. And so any development that occurs within the river valley comes to the board of directors for approval. As part of our jurisdiction, we are responsible for 90 kilometers of river valley and roughly 6,700 hectares of land. 60% of our jurisdiction falls within the city of Saskatoon limits and the remainder outside the city. The south end of our jurisdiction is south of Saskatoon, just past Beaver Creek Conservation Area, and north of Saskatoon to the Clarkborough Ferry Crossing between Aberdeen and Warman. And so we have a large variety of lands that we look after, and these lands are either could be owned by the city of Saskatoon, they could be provincial crown lands, they could be lands owned by the University of Saskatchewan, lands owned by Meewasin, and then also lands that are under partnership with other organizations. For example, Ducks Unlimited's Chapel Marsh fall within our jurisdiction, and we also help them on the land management of that property. So within our jurisdiction, we have 11 protected areas that are recognized by the federal government as protected areas, and 9 other sites that are recognized as other effective OACMs or other effective area-based conservation measure lands. And so we have a wider range of these protected areas, and we have other sites within the river valley that we're proposing for future recognition as OACMs. And the diversity of our habitats range from river valley slopes to creek areas to native grasslands that are either fescue prairie grasslands or sandy prairie sites as well. So we have a wider range of habitats within our jurisdiction that we look after. One of the challenges in Saskatchewan is we've seen a rapid decline of our grasslands across Saskatchewan. So this is a map from 2015 that was prepared showing what's left of our grasslands. And it's estimated that there is less than 14% of our native grasslands remaining in Saskatchewan. As you can see where Saskatoon is on the map, we're sort of on that northern edge of our grassland ecosystems in Saskatchewan, with the biggest proportion remaining still in that southwest portion of the province. And so as we see this change over time and the loss of our grasslands, it's really significant, shows how important it is to do conservation work to keep our grasslands healthy, keep them intact, but also the need to conserve the genetics of our grassland communities as well, and through the approaches like seed banking to conserve some of our seeds. So in 2017, Meewasin, in partnership with the Nature Conservancy of Canada, developed a valley-wide resource management plan for the Meewasin Valley and then also the surrounding area outside of our jurisdiction where Nature Conservancy is working. And within that plan, we identified 4 main conservation targets that we wanted to work on and help conserve. These include native grasslands, wetlands, rivers and creeks within the area, and then also complexes called swales, which are a combination of grassland and wetland communities, sort of a unique complex of ecosystems. And so within this resource management plan, we identified up to 150 different actions to help meet the conservation of these targets. One of the ideas that we looked at was something of a seed bank, and looking at creating a seed bank to help conserve seeds and for the short term and to the long term within our jurisdiction and within the Saskatoon region. Meewasin, as an organization, we have our own native plant greenhouse where we grow up towards of 10 to 15,000 native plants every year in our greenhouse that we use for our restoration projects. And we have a small little seed bank where it started out with an old 1970s refrigerator, and now we've actually expanded to also a deep freeze as well. And so we do collect seed within the River Valley. We do keep that seed for that short to medium term for our restoration projects. But as part of this resource management plan, we were thinking, is there opportunities to do a larger scale conservation of our seeds? So a seed bank is really the ex situ conservation of seeds to preserve their genetic diversity. So this is, in situ conservation is conserving lands and conserving the habitat that species exist in. Ex situ conservation is work similar to like zoos do, whereas you take species out of an area and you preserve them in a different area. And so that's how a seed bank works, is that ex situ conservation of plant seeds and that genetic diversity of plants. And so when you think within our jurisdiction, a sandy prairie at Beaver Creek Conservation Area, a native plant species is definitely different than a clay soil up at the Northeast Swale. There could be some genetic variances, but also if you compare native plants from the Saskatoon region to the Regina Plains, south of Regina, to this dry Swift Current area, there could be some genetic differences. And so that's conserving those unique characteristics of each species. Within a seed bank, it involves collecting the seed, cleaning the seed and drying it down, recording the information about it, and storing the seeds and at low temperatures. The storage can be for short-term projects, long-term, or that medium-term, or that long-term preservation. Worldwide, there's about 1,700 seed banks around the world, and about 410 of them that are actually have some sort of native plant germplasm stored. One of the more famous seed banks in the world is the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, which is located up in northern Norway, north of the Arctic Circle on an island. And this is sort of viewed as sort of the doomsday seed bank, where seeds from around the world are being stored in this location, and the intention is it's the long-term preservation of those plant materials. And there are seeds from Canada that are being stored at this location. So seed banks help preserve the genetic diversity of plants that are facing habitat loss. So the continual loss of our native prairie within Saskatchewan, storing that seed could be very important to keep that genetic diversity. As we face climate change and as species start shifting and moving, storing those genetic differences. The invasive species and pests. Yesterday I did an interview with the CBC Saskatchewan's 306 program, and we talked about western red lily and the red lily beetle that could have an impact to our wild populations of the western red lily. And so is a seed bank something that can help maintain that genetic diversity in the face of a pest threat? Also, could catastrophic events like storms, hurricanes, tornadoes. Here we don't experience that in this part of the world, but other parts of the world it becomes very important, or issues like wildfires. And then global conflicts as well. And you think of what's happening around the world in places like Ukraine and Syria, where their seed banks have actually been removed from their countries, to protect them while they're under conflict. But it's keeping that genetic material available for the future for those countries. And then also, 2 out of 5 of the world's plant species are actually at risk of extinction. So the importance of conserving that genetic diversity through seed is very critical for that long-term conservation. There's sort of in 3 main types of seed banks that you can work on. One is the acidualist one, where you're actually saving the seeds from your harvest and then planting them out in the next year. So if you're a seed saver in your garden and you save that heirloom tomato that you grow year after year, that would be that type of a seed banking. You save that seed, you maybe share it with others, but the intention is to grow it out, but you want to preserve that line of plant for future use. The productionist approach is conserving seeds that can help improve current crops by crossing with those seeds. So if you think of our wild crop relatives, like old varieties of wheat, saving those old varieties and then using that for future purposes. If you need to, develop a new variety with a certain type of, say, rust resistance or lodging resistance. And so taking those old varieties and having them available for future plant breeding programs, or having them available for future restoration projects as well. And then the preservationist approach, which is actually you're trying to preserve the seeds for the long term so that they're not destroyed or they're not lost and they're safeguarded for the future. Back in 2022 at COP15 in Montreal, the Global Biodiversity Framework was signed. And within that framework, they had 23 targets that were identified. So the second target, which is the big restoration, or is the big restoration target, the goal was by 2030 to restore 30% of our degraded habitats around the world by 2030, or at least start that process. If you've ever, we had a webinar a couple of weeks ago led by Tor Loken here at Meewasin, talking about some of the restoration projects that Meewasin's working on. So if you think of needing the seed and the plant material to do these restoration works, where you can get the seed from? You could do wild harvesting and collect seed, but sometimes you need to have the seed saved somewhere else so that you can access it when you need for restoration projects. And then Target 4 actually talks about that ex situ conservation of species. And so there's actually a specific target that talks about the importance of seed banking to maintain that genetic diversity to help with restoration over time. So in 2002, Meewasin worked with EDI consultants here in Saskatoon to work on a needs assessment for a seed bank. And so we worked with the Weston Family Foundation. They generously provided us with financial support to do this initial needs assessment. And so with the needs assessment, EDI went and consulted with different stakeholders around Western Canada to see if there's a need or a want for a seed bank. And we interviewed people that were researchers, landowners, ranchers, native seed producers, and plant breeders to see if there was interest in such an or in such a group or such an infrastructure to conserve our seeds. Within that too, they also reached out to various seed banks around the world, national seed banks here in Canada, but also global seed banks as well, to get feedback from them and get information from them, but also start that initial discussion on what strategic partnerships could look like. So within those recommendations, it came back with develop a strategic plan with a cost estimate, implement training within, as we start moving towards building a seed bank, but then also start developing standards that are, that meet international standards for seed banking, and then also build a network of relationships and partnership opportunities within to help create a seed bank. So overwhelming support from everyone that we talked to for the need for a seed bank here in Saskatoon, within Saskatchewan, and within the Prairie provinces of Saskatchewan. However, one of the challenges we had was, okay, how do we make this work? How do we proceed to a strategic plan? My understanding of seed banks was, I think of Svalbard, I think of the Kew Millennium Seed Bank in England, the Plant Gene Resources Center here in Saskatoon with Ag Canada. They have a seed bank as well. But how do we create something that is conservation focused, looking at native plant species that meets our needs here in the Saskatoon region, but that could be scaled across the Prairie provinces? So this is the Plant Gene Resources Center here in Saskatoon. It's the director is Axel there, standing beside me in the picture, and he graciously gave us a tour this past December with some colleagues with Meewasin, Waskawan Heritage Park and Nature Conservancy of Canada. And however, I've toured this site in the past, and so in my mind, this is what I was thinking: a structure like this, large freezer space, large research program as well, and then also how can we work, is there opportunities to work together? One of the challenges that Axel has, so his program focuses primarily on crops and wild crop relatives with a little bit of native plant germplasm. And so that's one of the challenges, is that his facility is actually bursting at the seams. They have seeds in the hallways. And so so their capacity is not to take on native plant species. But in my mind, this is sort of one of the models I was thinking of what a seed bank could look like. I had an opportunity to go visit the Alberta Tree Seed Improvement Center up at Smoky Lake, Alberta, back in March of 2023. And so this is actually the bunker there was built in the 1970s by the Alberta government to work with the forestry industry to preserve and conserve tree seedlings or tree seeds to be used in reforestation projects for the forestry industry. And so this facility it looks very much like a 1970s bunker. It's built with like 2 feet of concrete. It's 16 feet under, or 8 feet underground, and it's designed for that long-term storage of seed for the forestry industry. They also do a lot of research programs tied to the forestry industry, but it's actually their goal is not necessarily storing plant genetic diversity across Alberta. It's more geared towards the focus of key forestry species and some other species as well, but the primary focus is those forestry tree species. And then I had a chance to meet with individuals in June of actually 2023 from the National Tree Seed Center out of Fredericton, New Brunswick. This organization is ran through the Canadian Forest Service, and they focus on tree seeds as well, mainly for the forestry industry. However, as the federal government rolled out the 2 billion trees program, they started looking at a seed assessment, and then what is the supply chain looking like for tree seed availability across Canada to meet that program goals. One of the things that they started developing, though, was a program working with Indigenous communities on seed saving of trees and looking at it as an economic opportunity for communities as a driver for their local communities as well. And so their director, Donnie McPhee, actually in 2002, put together sort of a traveling caravan across across Canada. He went from coast to coast and up into the territories, meeting with different communities, talking to them about tree seed conservation, and started training programs on seed conservation. And so, very unique model as well. So traditional seed banking from to meet certain demands for market, but also developing training and community programs for seed banking. So in the summer of 2023, actually, I applied for something called a Nuffield Canada Agriculture Scholarship. And Nuffield scholarships are an international scholarship where it's based on agriculture for people in the agriculture industry studying a specific agriculture question. And there are people involved. There's an alumni of over 2,000 people from around the world, 16 different countries on 6 different continents, looking at different questions of agriculture. This is my cohort and I was accepted into the program. So this is my cohort of Nuffield scholars from 2024, from 6 of us from across Canada, studying everything from Indigenous agriculture to organic grazing and holistic grazing practices in PEI, to crop production systems, working with farmer research-based programs in Ontario. And so a wide variety of research. And agritourism, actually, one of the scholars is working on as well. And so really diverse programs. And so I was accepted to look at a program looking at native seed producer networks to try and increase the amount of seed available to do restoration work to meet that Target 2 goal for the Global Biodiversity Net framework. How do we get more seed available, and how do seed producers work together to increase the amount of seed? But also, if you're looking at seed from a seed production perspective, also the seed banking question comes into as well. So that's the second part of my project, is looking at seed banking. So this past summer, I had the opportunity to travel, so as part of Nuffield, it's a travel scholarship where you go and meet with other people to learn what they're doing and bring that information back to your program, and you write up a report. But you're also part of the goal of it is to share the information of what you see on your travels. So back in July, I traveled to Europe for 6 weeks, and one of my first stops was actually the Kew Millennium Seed Bank in Wakehurst, England, just south of London. And the Kew is probably one of the largest seed banks in the world, where they currently store 40% of the world's plant diversity within their seed bank. And so their goal is to eventually get to 100%. And so they're working with people around the world with local and regional seed banks to help that long-term storage of their seed within their facility. But also they have a large research-based program, and they have international researchers that come to this facility to do research on native seed conservation. And they also have funding programs to work around the world. I went to this picture from Mozambique. The Garfield Weston Foundation in England is actually working with them on tree seed conservation from around the world. And so it was interesting. The Weston Family Foundation, which provided us with support to investigate seed banking, is also funding Kew to do this large international program. This seed bank is actually also underground. The vaults are actually underground, 16 feet underground, and are designed to be nuclear bomb proof and flood proof and radiation proof as well. So it's intended to be that long-term conservation of seed. But they also work with sharing seeds with Svalbard and also the local and regional national seed banks as well, but also store seed for those groups as well. I spent a day touring around. It was a great facility. Also tied in with their facility is actually a botanical gardens, and Kew Botanical Gardens in London are extremely famous, but also this facility has botanical gardens as well. As part of my travels, I ended up in Ireland to meet with some different native seed producers. And I got to meet with this gentleman for a couple of days just south of Dublin. And his name is Sandro Cafola. And he's probably the most energetic person in the world when it comes to native plants and wildflowers. Extremely excited and really passionate about native plants. And he views himself as a living seed bank. And so he'll go into the remote areas of Ireland. One thing to consider, remember with Ireland is that over 80% of their habitats have been modified over the last 1,000 years. And so he's going into these remote areas of Ireland, up into the highlands, up into the mountains, collecting seed for a lot of rare and endangered species, working with the Irish government, but then working with individual growers to increase that seed to help preserve that seed. And so he views himself as a living seed bank. And so it was a really interesting model or a concept that he's working on, and thought, okay, this could be something that we could apply to our program here in Saskatoon. I was hoping to go visit this True Harvest Seeds up in Northern Ireland, not too far from Belfast. Logistics didn't work out at the last minute, but we didn't get to visit each other. But this group is actually a nonprofit organization. They're a nonprofit native seed business. And one of the things that they're working on is actually creating their own seed bank as well. And they're in the middle of a capital campaign of creating a seed bank. And so, so this is actually some of the schematics that they have of what their seed bank can look like. And so their goal is to preserve the genetics of Northern Ireland plant species, but then also use that to grow out as for future restoration projects as well. And so unique concept for something to consider as well here in the Saskatoon region. I had the opportunity to meet with Dr. Sabine Zago with the University of Osnabrück in Germany, so up in northwestern part of Germany. And she's the director of the Botanical Gardens at the University of Osnabrück, but also she looks after the seed bank project there. So in Germany, there are 4 seed banks tied in with 4 different botanical gardens that work together on the conservation of native plant genetics within Germany. And so her facility is actually a really a series of 3 walk-in freezers. 2 of them are walk-in coolers that are kept at 4 degrees Celsius, and a third one which is kept at minus 21 degrees Celsius with a little bit of humidity control. And so very basic seed bank. And the building that it's stored in looks like a storage shed on the grounds. But one of the things that she worked on, and with the other seed banks around Germany, is a prioritization process of how to determine which species to focus on. And so like in Germany, there's over 4,000 different wild ferns and flowering plant species. They broke it down to how many different wild species there are, which is roughly 2,800 different species. And then they worked on that prioritization list on which ones they should start focusing their programs on. And each seed bank works cooperatively within Germany, and they share resources and seed, and also help target seed collection. One of the challenges that they have is their seed collection is only done by staff and by technicians, but also contractors, typically which are instructors with the different universities that are during the summer months aren't busy teaching, that are going out and doing collections within the wild spaces of Germany. Part of my trip to Germany, I met with this individual, Fred Eichmeyer, and he's from the southeastern part of Germany near in Bavaria. And he's actually he's a plant breeder and a native plant breeder. And so he's working on different projects looking at different aspects of using native plants in Germany for different, where it's medicinal purposes, food purposes, or in this case, he's working with Russian dandelion for latex rubber. And so he's actually doing selective breeding with native plants to try and increase the amount of latex rubber within the Russian dandelion to be used for the tire industry. And so a lot of his work is actually, he gets a lot of his seed sources from different seed banks from around the world for the projects that he's working on. So in the case of this Russian dandelion project, he accessed Russian dandelion seed from the Russian seed bank at St. Petersburg, Russia, which is actually the oldest seed bank in the world. But he's also been working on some different projects with different legume species, and he's actually accessed seed. It's German-based species, but they've lost that seed for that species in Germany. But there was a seed bank in the United States that had the seed that he was able to access. And so it was interesting to get his take on, the value of seed banking from a plant breeder perspective and a research perspective. As part of my trip throughout Europe, I was meeting with a lot of different native seed producers, different rewilding projects, different restoration projects as well. I also attended the Society for Ecological Restoration conference in Tartu, Estonia. And there was a field trip that I was going on, and it turns out the lady that I sat beside on the bus is Sandrine Godefroid from the Belgium seed bank. So she's they're the only seed bank in Belgium, and they are working on a big seed banking project in Belgium, and also with species from Congo as well. So their seed bank, where they're located at the Botanical Garden, is actually one of the largest herbariums in the world. They're about the 15th largest herbarium in the world. Their seed bank has actually some unique species. I think that's the largest banana repository as well in the world as well. And so really interesting talking with her on their seed banking program in Belgium and the process that they go through. One of the things that she has a limited budget with the amount of, to do the work in Belgium. So they work with a lot of volunteers to go out and collect seed. And so quite often it's volunteers from different conservation agencies or land trusts that own land that go out, collect the seed off these different protected areas, and then provide that seed into their seed bank. So another interesting concept that we can look at here in Saskatoon. But yeah, one of those things, you just sit beside the right person on the bus on a tour. When I was in Tartu, I went to visit the University of Tartu's Botanical Garden. So a lot of the seed banks around the world are tied in with botanical gardens. And when you think about a botanical garden, they're showcasing the diversity of the world through plants. And so, having a seed bank to preserve seeds and sharing seeds amongst the botanical gardens, makes sense that they're the forerunners of a lot of these seed banking projects. And so one of the things too is a lot of these seed banks do landscaping in their botanical garden, or the botanical gardens do landscaping with native plant material. And I thought this was quite unique in Tartu. They set up demonstration gardens of each sort of unique ecoregion of Estonia. And since 2017, they've been growing about 700 native plant species within their gardens and showcasing about half of the diversity of Estonia. And it was interesting looking at these plants because there's a lot of circumpolar plants that we have here in Saskatchewan up in our boreal forest that are also found in Estonia. And yeah, so it was very interesting to see how they did that landscaping, to showcase each ecosystem, and then talk about the individual native species as well. Also, Google Translate was extremely handy on this trip. So that was my trip to Europe. When I got back, I went to the North America Society for Ecological Restoration in Vancouver back in November. And I ended up sitting at the table one day beside Jill Wagner from Hawaii. And it was and her work in Hawaii is a lot of work with seed conservation in Hawaii. And so in Hawaii, each each main island in Hawaii has their own individual seed bank. And their seed banking program is not just to conserve native plant material, but also to work with local farmers to store their seed as well in their seed banking programs as well. So if you're a producer of a certain fruit species or another crop species, you can store your seed in there and access that seed at a later date. And so another unique concept, working with individual producers as well. Also, one of the things that they've worked on is actually developing a off-the-grid portable seed bank system. So what's being shown here is pictures of a sea can, a 40-foot sea can that they've actually converted into a seed bank, and off the grid, and they've actually deployed in different parts of the world. This one in the top corner is actually a picture of one that was sent to Kenya, and they were able to, for that one that they sent to Kenya, they built it and shipped it for less than $125,000 US dollars. And so simple sea can, insulated it. The front half is lab space and research space, seed cleaning space. The back half is deep walk-in freezer, walk-in cold room, kept at 4 degrees Celsius. And then behind the cold room is their freezer that's kept at minus 20 degrees Celsius, also with humidity control as well in each of those buildings or each of those components. And the intention is with this design is to, get that quick seed bank up and running, and then until you can build up that bigger infrastructure, and also to make it cheap, portable, and so that you can use in local seed banking initiatives. So this last February, as part of my Nuffield travels, I went to Arizona to attend the National the National Native Seed Conference in Tucson, Arizona. I was speaking at that conference, but giving a presentation on my Nuffield project and what's going on in Western Canada for native seed producer networks. But also I had an opportunity to do some tours and meet with different producers and also seed banking operations there. So I had a chance to meet with Native Seed Search. This is an Indigenous-based organization, nonprofit organization that focuses on conserving the diversity of the three sisters species, so squash, corn, and beans, and working with local communities to conserve and store their local unique varieties of species, of those vegetable species, but other species as well. But then also getting that seed back out to the public, so they have a store that sells seed, but also to give it back to those communities for increase in growing. One of the things that their model looks at is, since they're crop species or vegetable species, they're constantly growing out and doing increases, and so they're working with 20 different producers or 20 different communities to do the increase of different species as well. The dots on the middle map there is actually showing of where all the different collection sites that they've worked on in Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and Mexico. And so a really unique model. My fellow Nuffield scholar, Tatum Claypool, actually met with them as part of her project a couple of months prior, because she's looking at Indigenous agriculture opportunities. And so it's interesting how I'm looking at native seed and native seed producers and networks and seed banking. She's looking at agriculture from an Indigenous perspective, how our projects are overlapping in quite a few different places. And then also when I was in Arizona, I met with Borderlands Nursery and Seed. This is located south of Tucson towards the Tombstone country near the Mexican border. And they do a lot of restoration work, and within the region, they collect local seed, and then they do the restoration work within that region. They have their own little seed bank as well. They have an old trailer that they insulated, put an air conditioner in it, put inside one of their buildings, and they run their own seed bank as well. And so they take that seed and use that seed in their seed nursery for increase, and then use that for restoration purposes. And also they sell seed as well, and native plants as well. So another model to look at. So I definitely want to thank, and as part of my Nuffield scholarship, I'm still continuing my project until September, and so I'm still going to be traveling throughout Western Canada, into the United States, and into Eastern Canada, and to learn more about these opportunities. And then as part of Nuffield is you provide a report and recommendations to help your industry. But then also as part of the scholarship is to share that information as well. So I'd like to thank Nature Conservancy of Canada as my primary sponsor for my scholarship, but also SAS Parks, Blazing Star Wildflower Seed Company, Meewasin Valley Authority for being very supportive and also helping me attend some of these conferences, Brett Young Seeds, Native Plant Society, Institute for Applied Ecology, Skinner Native Seeds in Manitoba, Saskatchewan Environmental Society, and Coxworth Fund, Alkla Native Plants in Alberta, and KT Honey. So, I'd like to really thank their support for helping me work on this project and meet with people to learn from them to share this information. And then I have in-kind supporters as well that are helping get the message out to different groups and giving me opportunities to speak. So coming back to Saskatoon, traveled across Europe and learned about seed banking projects. And so then we brought together, before I left to Europe, actually, we worked with EDI consultants and we brought in a steering committee or a stakeholder committee to talk about seed banking. So we had a half-day workshop talking about seed banking, what could it look like for Saskatchewan and Western Canada, did my travels to Europe, came back in the fall, and then we had another meeting and I shared what I learned and we started working on a strategic plan for a seed bank. And so this is just off the press a couple months ago. And as part of this, we developed a vision that the seed bank provides that long-term for restoration, preservation, and protection of our prairie grassland biodiversity for future generations, but also sparking an interest and love for our native grasslands and our future. And so this is so the intention is, not just that preservation of that seed, but being able to use it for other opportunities and also to engage the public to increase that passion for the native prairie. I'd like to thank Weston Family Foundation for supporting us in the development of the strategic plan. So within the strategic plan, we looked at sort of 3 phases of how we can get this up and running. So the first phase is that establish that seed bank, get it off the ground, get things going. The second phase is scaling it up to a regional focus base with sort of a bricks and mortar, having a strong presence or a building. And then that third phase is maintaining that seed bank for the long term. So the establishment phase, what we're looking at within the strategic plan is that model from Hawaii, creating that portable seed bank, that simple seed-can structure. So you can at least start with a facility so that once you start collecting seed, you can clean the seed, store the seed, catalog the seed, and then start that process. Within that process too is develop a strategic plan on which, or sort of a strategic focus on which species we should prioritize, how we should prioritize them, what areas we should collect from, develop strategic partnerships as well on, whether it's with conservation agencies, ranchers, native seed producers as well, to get the seed into the seed bank. The phase 2 is actually looking at that bricks and mortar, building a facility, and a research grade facility, but also tying in botanical gardens of some sort or demonstration gardens of our native plants, and tying in that opportunity for researchers to work with this native plant material as well, whether it's researchers from the University of Saskatchewan or other institutions. Also with this, working with national and international seed banks as well for sharing that seed with other researchers or with other seed banks around the world for either that long-term preservation or as part of their research programs from around the world. And then also work and help expand the idea of local seed bank initiatives. So whether it's a local indigenous community, a local or a conservation group that is interested in seed banking, working with them with standards and practices and best management practices to help set up their programs, but then also to provide that storage capability as well. Also, taking this concept of this portable seed bank idea and maybe helping these groups that are interested in that, maybe developing their infrastructure as well. And then that third phase is maintaining that seed bank program for the long term. That's one thing with any project is you got to look at that long-term maintenance. How can we make sure this is successful over the long term to meet our goals and needs for seed conservation for future generations? So right now we've just completed the strategic plan, and we've been talking to people about it. We've been talking about the concept of a seed bank for more than 10 years, but now we're starting that stage where we're going to start looking at trying to find those strategic partnerships and finding those opportunities to get this project off the ground. Yeah, so outcomes, that first phase, getting all people in place, getting that facility, do the protocol development, partnership development, and also look at ways to engage volunteers. And then also as that second phase, that regional network of seed banking. So why would we look at Saskatoon for a native plant seed bank? So Saskatoon is quite unique. With the University of Saskatchewan here in Saskatoon, there's with the College of Agriculture and Bioresources, School of Environment, Department of Biology, the W.P. Fraser Herbarium. There's a lot of opportunities there from a teaching and a research facility perspective, to tie in to a seed bank project. Also, and there's also plant breeders as well, looking at native plant material. Also, Agriculture Canada is on University of Saskatchewan campus with their Plant Gene Resources of Canada. And so there's an opportunity there to create this synergy and symbiosis between a partnership between a native plant seed bank and also Ag Canada. Also with Meewasin, the nature of who we are, we're a partnership-based organization, but we are also working on several other initiatives that are beyond just our local efforts. So one of the things we've been delivering for the last 5 years is something called the Canadian Prairie's Prescribed Fire Exchange, where we're working with people interested in using fire as a land management tool in native grasslands. And we're working, we hold the grant that has created this organization. So we're working with partners across the 3 Prairie provinces. So, the concept of a fire exchange could be adopted in sort of a seed bank type program as well. And then also, we're investigating the potential of creating a national urban park here in Saskatoon. And so maybe this could be part of that network of national urban parks, that seed bank network as well. So, so that's the seed bank discussion. We have our next RBC Tech for Nature webinar series coming up on April 7th. Jamie McMillan, who's our interpretive programs coordinator, bird enthusiast, she's going to be talking about birds are amazing, and she's going to give us a great webinar talking about the joy and wonder of watching birds. Also, we've had 3 other webinars this year, and talking about the history of Beaver Creek Conservation Area, Meewasin's restoration projects, and also Meewasin's wildlife monitoring programs as well. So check out our YouTube channel to catch those. So with that, I'd like to thank you for joining us today for this webinar, and I really appreciate everyone taking the time to watch us, and hope I could share some of that passion on the need for a seed bank here in the prairies of Canada.
If there's any questions, feel free to either raise your hand, unmute yourself, ask, or in the chat is great. We do have a few minutes left in this hour. You have a question, Sam, go for it. No?